made those totally and utterly disgraceful comments yesterday with regard to prostitution, and that's Mick Wallace, who topped the poll in Wexford, and he was on John Murray yesterday, advocating also yesterday for prostitution to be legalised. And I would urge ye as citizens to make contact with him by email or to write him a letter to express your utter disgust at his commentary and his utter ignorance at his commentary yesterday. I no doubt that your own organisation, Stop the Red Light, will be making an organisational response, but I think as citizens we also must make it known our own commentary. So without, just as that an introduction, we have a wonderful panel today who will have about 6 to 7 minutes to discuss their experiences from their organisations, and then I would like ye here to ask questions and to contribute to the discussion as you see fit afterwards. So first of all, Patricia Kelleher, who is an expert on human trafficking in Ireland and has written a book on globalisation, sex trafficking and prostitution, the experiences of migrant women in Ireland. She is associated with the Department of Sociology here in UL and has her own research company as well, Keller Associates. So she's going to be our first speaker.
Okay, thank you, Aideen, and thank you to Doris Linley and to the campaign for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk about the findings of the study Globalisation, Sex Trafficking and Prostitution, which was commissioned by the Immigrant Council of Ireland and which deals with the links between prostitution and trafficking. I'd like to make 3 points first about prostitution. I know time is very scarce, so I'll make these points very fast. Prostitution is firstly a gender issue. That is, it is men who buy sex overwhelmingly. It's also a class issue in the sense that it is mainly poor women from impoverished regions of the world who are involved in prostitution. And although men from all classes buy sex, buyers are concentrated in the middle and upper middle income classes and the professional groups. Thirdly, the prostitution industry is now highly ethnicised. In Ireland, approximately 90% of women in indoor prostitution are migrant women. Now, the flow of migrant women into Ireland for the purpose of prostitution started in the early 2000s and coincided with the Irish prostitution industry moving from street to indoor prostitution. What we now have in Ireland is a highly lucrative, internet-based, indoor global prostitution trade worth an estimated €180 million. According to an ESRI study carried out in 2006, 1 in 50 men, that's about 6% in Ireland, reported buying sex. The majority of these men were married or in a relationship. Now this number, I'd just like to say, is low compared to other countries. But it gives us a unique opportunity to develop a zero tolerance to the buying of sex. Now, the globalised nature of Irish prostitution means that the networks of control are highly internationalised. There is evidence that Irish indigenous criminal gangs are linked to Eastern European, Central European and African gangs. These networks ensure a highly ethnicised prostitution sector in Ireland, which currently comprises a staggering 51 separate nationalities of women, with over 1,000 women engaging in prostitution at any one time. On any one day, 19 of the 26 counties in Ireland will have women for rent, and these women are available not only in the bigger cities and towns, but in smaller villages throughout Ireland. Women can be ordered by body type, nationality, age and sexual acts the buyer wants. Now, as well as examining the prostitution industry, globalisation, sex trafficking and prostitution looked at the trafficking of women into the Irish prostitution industry. What is clear is that the trafficking of women is indeed a reality. We identified 102 women as trafficked over a 21-month period, 11% of whom were children. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg and only reflects the numbers of women and children that were identified by service providers as trafficked. The 102 women and children came from 15 different African countries and 7 central acts of rape and gang rape used to ensure compliance, even before these women or children leave the country of origin. In our study, we found 30% were gang raped in the country of origin or while being trafficked. 56% were raped in transit. Nearly 3/4 were repeatedly beaten. Over half of the women were held hostage while in Ireland, and the remaining women were kept under control by violence, threats to kill, harm their family back home, and threats to report their legal status to authorities. Others were psychologically enslaved after undergoing a voodoo ceremony. When women and children arrive in Ireland, women are placed under indentured prostitution to pay back a supposed debt, which can be as high as 55,000 to 65,000 euro. A policeman in Britain gave evidence to the researchers that in order to repay the money owed, one woman who was trafficked through Ireland was forced to have sex 30 times a day. The majority of the 102 women and children were trafficked into indoor prostitution, and just half were prostituted outside of Ireland. Now it's interesting then to look at the men who buy sex. Prostitution is not only about the payment of money for sex, it's about the economic and sexual power. It's about the idea that men have an entitlement to have their sexual needs met through prostitution, and that there is and should be a special group of women who are available to perform this function. One of the myths of prostitution is that prostitution is a safety valve for society, which allows for the expression of the male sexual drive that cannot be contained within a relationship context. While this may be functional for some men, the psychological and emotional damage and harm prostitution practices causes to women is now well documented. And I think later on this morning we're going to hear from Emer. Research indicates that many of the men are aware that coercive tactics, such as being physically beaten, raped, gang raped, harassed and stalked, is exercised over women while in prostitution. They're also aware of the vulnerability factors associated with prostitution, such as poverty and childhood sexual abuse. Men rationalise prostitution and see their entitlement to sex as a biological imperative. With the increasing commodification of sex, prostitution for many is now seen in terms of consumer choice, where buyers seek out good value for money. Some men pay large sums of money for high-class prostitutes. Others seek out a cheap variety of sex, known in the trade as Mac sex, the Mac being an abbreviation of McDonald's. For other men, prostitution is about men seeking sexual solutions to childhood trauma and emotional difficulties. Whatever the motivations or meanings which buyers give to prostitution, the structural and institutional factors which allow prostitution to exist relate to the privileging of male sexuality in a society where the sexes are not equal. Just to conclude, it is important to realise that while violence against women is widespread, not all men are violent, and only a small minority of men in Ireland engage in the buying of sex. Now, it's very hopeful sign to see so many people involved in the campaign, Turn Off the Red Light campaign. But most importantly, I just conclude by saying that if the trafficking of women and children is to be eliminated, the demand side of prostitution needs to be addressed. It's to state the obvious that without demand, there would be no need for trafficked women. Have you any more time? Huh?
You're kind of finished there.
Okay.
We'll sum it up with questions and answers yesterday.
Okay.
Thank you for that excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say, I think there are several things. Is that okay? Perfect. Yeah, several things happening in Ireland in the late 90s and early 2000s. One was you had the availability of the mobile phone and technology and the internet, and this made the downloading of pornography and internet prostitution much more available to people. And secondly, I think you had much more globalisation taking place. So the development of not just criminal networks in Ireland, but they had links into international networks. They were allowed then to bring women into Ireland. And the prostitution industry is about moving women from one place to another. So women may come into Ireland and they may be here for 3 or 4 weeks. They may be in Dublin for 5 days, in Kilkenny for 2 days, and then in London or Belfast. So it's a highly mobile industry, both in terms of movement and in terms of internet. So I think all of those things were happening. And also there was increasing sanctions against women who are working in street prostitution. There was legislation brought in to move women on, and so people felt safer against the guards in terms of indoor prostitution. But I think the big factors were the technology and globalisation that was taking place, and so that we moved as part of a globalised network, a globalised sex industry, and that's what we are now, I think. Thank you.